industrial use just in the recent past to BB Station. There used to be, a connected series of industrial spaces here. On this side, there were large cylindrical structures called bellows, which were a part of the coal gasification, which converted the coal to gas, which was then piped across the river to BB Station to burn it for electricity. It's kind of, to us, it's a moment in time that is exceptionally interesting and fits into this broader arc even of reliance on the hydro capabilities of the waterfall originally, and maybe where we're headed in the future with more green energy rather than petroleum-based. But it starts to set up a connective piece between the two lobes of the park, from the east over to the west. And you've probably noticed down on the river, there are these funny concrete pylons that track across it. That's really what the function of those pylons was. It was the gas that would connect the two sides of the power plant. And our hope is that can be redecked and reused as a bridge structure to be really the primary staple between the two sides of the park, make it really easy to connect the two sides. Moving to the other side of the river now, to the west side, this is of course where the Browns Race Historic District is. This is more proximate to the Central Business District and other Rock the Way projects that are ongoing. The concept that's laid out today uses the west side as kind of the program core more largely of the park. It's also the easier access to the base of the waterfall. But we're thinking that this is where there'll be an urban ecology center, which is a version of a visitor center for the park. So it'll provide a means of orientation, some explanation of the environmental conditions inside the gorge, and then more broadly explore this notion of urban ecology and how people can maybe bring some lessons home to their own yards, either here in the city or elsewhere. A whole variety of access points would be available on the west side. We're thinking in particular related to the Browns Race Historic District, because there's really a great synergy there between the scale and magnitude of that space and what might happen down in the park as well. So along kind of the rim, there'd be other trailhead elements, as I mentioned, would be along sort of the St. Paul side as well. There'd be some landscape that's devoted to children. We're not sure if that would be a more conventional playground, which you see in a lot of state parks, are very, very popular, or if there could be something that is a little bit more dialed into the specific histories of this site, something that can serve local residents and more regional visitors as well. There's a great opportunity to provide education for children, for the public. There's something interesting, especially about the broader parks mission about stewardship of natural spaces, and letting kids experience what that might mean in ways that are very accessible to them in the form of play, related right into the urban ecology center core of the west side of the park. We'd like to suggest engaging, allowing people to engage with the ruins of BB Station. There's some very interesting wall remnants that exist along that section of the park space, the future park space. So getting people up close and personal to that. Tying into the proposed elevator, which would exist, Rich is nodding his head, exist over there off the back of one of the city properties.
Some form of vertical access, yes.
Some form of vertical access, okay. Tying into that, as well as providing ongoing access for RG&E, they still do operate a small hydro facility down here near the base of the falls. So there's some just very practical considerations about how the circulation will need to work down here. And then ultimately, getting people front and center at the base of the waterfall. It really is, so I live in Ithaca, and I'm sure you've all experienced the base of the waterfall. I'm sorry? All right, yeah. So just getting close to the base of the waterfall really is a magical thing. So we're trying to strike a balance here between practicalities again and that experience. So really that's what you're seeing here in this board is potentially creating an observation deck out in the river. And we were thinking of construction methods that might be similar to what's down in Turning Point Park. Actually, those constructed boardwalks are really they're quite beautiful in how humble they are. They really do their job without trying to be something in the landscape. It's just a way for you to experience the broader landscape. So that's what you're seeing reflected on this concept, at least. Okay, continuing our counterclockwise tour, very high speed. Couple of proposed connections over towards the inner loop, which, as you all know, is undergoing a great redesign right now that is coming to a conclusion soon. But trying to find ways of, again, connecting out more broadly into the neighborhood, in this case, into Center City, both on the east and west sides of the river. The park will engage High Falls Terrace Park, which is a city park, right there at the top of the gorge. It's the spot, along with the Pont de Rennes, it's the spot that's got really the best views of the waterfall presently. So not exactly sure what role it will play in the assembly of spaces that will eventually create the park, but we are hoping that it will be home to one of these identity components that I've mentioned, getting the identity of the park visible and above the rim for the public to really understand. There's a trail system that's been proposed behind the brewery, and actually through the High Falls Terrace Park as well, which is now underway. But the piece that's behind the brewery itself is going to take a little effort. That's a big lift. But seeking this upper level continuous circulation route, again, to give people that flexibility and those options for how they use the spaces, what views that might open up. There's some really interesting elements to what that might become eventually. But then that would connect you out to Suntrue Street ultimately, which then gets you access down into the lower level of the gorge again at the Suntrue Street entrance. So that's very high level, of course. I think it's worth mentioning that the running track bridge and the El Camino trail system is not necessarily a part of what we're doing today, but should totally be considered in all of our conversations forward. It's got its own complexities, and the city is doing what it can to get that bridge stabilized and take the next steps in its construction as well. But we're mindful of how we might connect up to it and think of these all of these facilities in concert into a single experience.
Jonathan,
Can I take a breath?
take a breath. I'm also thinking if you could just talk for a minute about how fascinating the experience of the water is from kind of the south to the north, and maybe just speak to this rendering for a minute, because there's that moment, right, that the water changes and quiets and
Sure.
provides a variety of potential experiences within the park.
Right. Yeah, that's it's pretty remarkable when you're down in the gorge, and maybe some of you have been down to various parts of it, but there's this great audible quality to the water sheet moving through that space. Closer to the waterfall, it can be nearly deafening at times. I remember we had sort of a project team orientation,
Screaming.
trying to talk to each other. Maybe it was like April or May or something, standing in High Falls Terrace Park. We couldn't even hear each other. It was amazing. But getting down towards the water sheet, especially further north, it really quiets, and it becomes almost a tranquil experience. And that's really interesting, and just trying to provide access to a variety of different experiences for the public would be really special about this High Falls State Park. It almost becomes, it's quiet. It's a very sort of internal experience. You're very immersed in green space with just these little nods of city all around you. It's very interesting. It's a really lovely river bank through there. And this graphic that Kim was pointing out is looking just in this portion of the park, almost imagining that you were on this bridge that would cross from one side to the other, looking back at what is now the location of the incinerator building. So that's what's missing, if you're able to pick that out. The smokestack, which is right here in the plan, we're thinking could be this magnificent icon that would be visible from many different locations in the city, to get people a better awareness of the existence of the park. But we're hoping that can be stabilized. this point, we're thinking that this rendering at least depicts the removal of that incinerator building, knowing what the broader fate of BB Station was. But in the foreground, what you're seeing is a softening of the river's edge. There's a whole section through here that's up on an 8 or a 10-foot tall concrete retaining wall that was built long ago to sort of keep BB Station up and clear from all of the flood elevations in the river. So it's sort of a means of protecting that piece of infrastructure. So we're envisioning removing a part of that wall, softening that shoreline, just to create some variety in the experience and a great educational moment in the space about again, urban ecology and maybe how to reset some thinking. These are the other and then there might be other graphics back there on the tables. There's the bird's eye view on the board at the back of the room that sort of hovers, looking down into the river from about this location, looking back south towards downtown. And we did take some liberties with the color of the water.
Lovely shade of blue.
Yeah.
A little muddy.
Yeah, it's not quite the classic latte. Great. Okay, so back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jonathan.